I'll mute. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Club at the End of the World. I'm here with my buddy Dan Bader. Dan, how you doing today?
Good, Jamin. Glad to be here. And hello to anybody who's hearing this or seeing it at any time.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to do a little screen share and share some of the latest on the movement to compassionately purge all criminal drug cartels from the state of Washington and then planet Earth. This is the big, do you see this, Dan? What's on the screen? Anyway, I'm going to assume yes. So there is, I can't see.
Yeah, okay. Jamin, I can see it just fine. It's good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So basically, the big red arrow indicates the path that we're on. All right. The blue arrow indicates one possible off-ramp that we can take to get off of this path towards hell on earth that we're accelerating on right now. This is one possible off-ramp, and the off-ramp has 3 stages in the realm of stop the harm. And then as we stop the harm, we transition towards healing. Actually, both can happen simultaneously, but I'm just going to take a minute and let you just sort of digest and just fire away with any questions that you may have, or I can, kind of walk us through it in a minute.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I see that Doctors has joined in. I don't know if you can see that, Jamin.
Oh, no. All I can see is my screen. Doctors, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good.
Okay, great. Well, we just kind of hit the ground running here. I'm doing a screen share, and we're recording also. That's important to note. We're recording. This is a screen share of one of the new posters that I'm showing along with my performance at the University of Washington and soon to be elsewhere.
Yeah, so Jamin.
Where else is your performance?
I'm sorry, we got some echo. Can you repeat, Doctors, please?
So where else are you going to perform it?
Well, tomorrow, for example, I'm going to perform at this major intersection, which is right across the street from one of the main entrances to the university, which is right across also from the main medical complex of the University of Washington Medical Center, Medical School, and all that. It's also where the light rail station is for the university. And also the stadium is right there. It's just this major traffic intersection. So that's where I'll be performing tomorrow, all day tomorrow, which is Halloween, of course. And so, the fact that I'm in a costume and that it is Halloween, I'm kind of hoping that'll kind of create an environment for more people to come up. But lots of people have been coming up and talking. And then I'm also going to go to Olympia, to the state capitol at some point, and just various points downtown, Seattle, for example, various spots. But this is one of 2 new posters that I've been including in my, thing, along with the one that you already know well. So the red arrow shows indicates the path that we're on, right? With increased organized crimes against Mother Earth, giving us mass extinction, including human extinction. That's pretty clear. The blue arrow represents an off-ramp, one possible off-ramp. In this kind of big picture way that I'm thinking about all this is, we're on this path indicated by the red arrow. We need to find some way to break out of that path. And that's a very tall order, given that there's 7.3 billion of us and people are afraid. Everyone's afraid. So what are people doing? They're hoarding. They're hoarding for a rainy day, or in this case, a very hot day, which is coming up. But the brutal paradox is that it is precisely our hoarding that has driven us to chop down trees and mine minerals and do all the terrible stuff that's destroying Mother Earth. So it's just a really vicious death spiral that we're on. We all know it well. So I'm hypothesizing that there may be an off-ramp that we can take off of this highway to hell that puts us on a whole different trajectory. And the off-ramp that I'm suggesting is one, this one in particular pivots on, you know, of these three circles that really define the off-ramp. There's one word that is common among all of them, and that is the word crime. So we're pivoting off of crime, basically saying, look, let's get rid of organized crime. Let's start with criminal drug cartels. That's low-hanging fruit. That's relatively easy to get rid of. I postulate if we actually decide to do it as a society. And then from there, as we accomplish that milestone, we expand the scope to include all forms of organized crime. Sicilian mafia, Russian mafia, Brazilian mafia, you name it. And from there, we expand the scope further to include organized crimes against Mother Earth. So basically, we're talking about building a planetary revolution centered on getting rid of crime and ultimately eliminating organized crimes against Mother Earth. We got bad echo. Somebody needs to mute their microphone, please. Pretty please, pretty please. Mute your microphone if you're not talking. Pretty please with a cherry on top. Okay, thank you. And then as we eliminate the harm, we also simultaneously, though it doesn't look simultaneous in this image, but the idea is stop the harm and start the healing towards the whole world. And have a whole planetary culture that, far from being based on extraction and carving up and hoarding, we have a planetary culture based on healing, stopping the harm and healing, right? So anyway, any comments or questions while I've got this up on the screen?
It's a nice poster, and it does show the concept, the drug cartels, organized crime, all forms, and then organized crimes against Mother Earth, connecting, because structurally it's just very, very similar. And hell is coming, actually, and then extinction can follow that at some point, down the road. It'd be great, if you could send me the poster as an attachment, and it's okay, I could start handing it out.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I will do that, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm muting out.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions or comments about this poster before I go on to the next poster? And then we can always come back to this one. All right. One thing I want to point out, that what makes this viable as a strategy is that criminal drug cartels are actually very easy to topple. And I'll show what I mean by that with this next poster. This addresses the question, all right, well, how do we get rid of criminal drug cartels? All right, how do we do that? I envision basically a two-phase process that can happen simultaneously. One is repeal prohibition, and by that I mean federal prohibition, which is unconstitutional and has given birth to all these violent criminal drug cartels. And then along with that, well, what do we replace prohibition with? And I put a big blank there because the reality is we don't know yet. But it's something that I'm saying we, Washington, we, the state of Washington, need to figure this out for ourselves at a state level because it's a states' rights issue per the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. States' rights. It's our right to figure this out, whether we want to prohibit X, Y, and Z substance or not, or whatever. It's a states' rights issue. The federal government has no business meddling with our internal policies and laws regarding drugs. So we come up with our own answer. We replace prohibition in so doing, the goal is that we take the market away from the criminal drug cartels. You see, it's federal prohibition that created the cartels and keeps them in power. So we need to topple prohibition to topple the cartels, to knock out the foundation of their financial viability, which is they've got the basically exclusive rights granted to them by federal prohibition. They have the exclusive right to traffic in illicit substances. Now, how is that right granted to them by federal prohibition? It's very simple. By criminalizing drugs and drug trafficking, the federal prohibition mandates that the entire drug trafficking industry of illicit substances must go into the hands of these violent criminal drug cartels. It's really that simple. It doesn't say so in so many words in the law of prohibition, the laws and policies supporting prohibition, but that's the inevitable consequence, and that's the reality we need to face. So the point of all this is, with the stroke of a pen, we can repeal prohibition. With a bunch of other pen strokes, we can replace it with something more sensible and thus knock out the foundation of these criminal drug cartels. And that's what makes this big strategy viable. This first domino is an easy one to knock over: criminal drug cartels. When we do that, we will earn the political capital needed to then expand our mandate from criminal drug cartels to all forms of organized crime. And then that becomes, we will have so much political capital, basically taking the credit for knocking over criminal drug cartels, that we will use that political capital to expand the mandate, expand the movement, and get rid of all forms of organized crime, including organized crimes against Mother Earth. But it starts with this one key victory called criminal drug cartels, because they're the low-hanging fruit. Everybody hates them. Nobody likes them. They just do so many different evil things, from human trafficking to trafficking in endangered species, you name it, because they're the ones with the smuggling routes. So knock them over and away we go, right? And the story of all this, and the story of Darth Vader cruising around and doing all this crazy stuff, right? That whole story takes us to a place where wait a second here. Okay. Back to that whole story takes us to a place where the world is just watching and wait. It's like, wow, finally there's some heroes out there and heroines taking on and taking down organized crime, including organized crime against Mother Earth. I mean, it's such a compelling story, right? So that's the story that I call out with the bad. Out with the bad. Let's get rid of the evil. Let's get rid of organized crime, starting with criminal drug cartels and including organized crimes against Mother Earth. And then from there, that's basically one half of the overall strategy. I'm looking for the image of the other half. let's see, which I may or may not find here. Actually, I've got another image that I want to show. I probably showed it last time, but first let me see if I can find this image of the virtuous cycle of bringing in the good. And let me see where I can find that. All right, well, I'll have to find it when I find it and have it at the ready for next time. But basically, it's an image that conveys what I'm about to convey in a slightly different form. And I'll do a screen share for that. So anyway, everything I've talked about in the last few minutes can be summarized as that's out with the bad. Now we're going to look at in with the good. What is the good? Community cafes, feeding people nutritious foods for free, ending world hunger. To fund these, we need a global economic engine. We start with Sato Hemp, and led by my brother Takuya Sato, the Hemperor of Japan. So we start with Sato Hemp, create a virtuous cycle where the success of the community cafes drives more demand for Sato Hemp. More people buy Sato Hemp, more money for community cafes. We put compassion in fashion and evolve this so that it's not just one brand, but a whole compassionate fashion industry, putting compassion in fashion, end world hunger. And then continue the transformation towards a compassionate economy from one compassionate industry to a whole compassionate economy, leading towards a whole world, all with virtuous cycles. And anyway, so what could be more good than feeding hungry people? Nutritious foods sourced from regenerative agriculture networks which heal Mother Earth rather than destroy her. And so the dream team that we have pushing all this, both Sato Hemp, also there's a new standard for the global economy that we're pioneering called CCC, the compassionate economy. So CCC companies donate all their profits to ending hunger and are also socially transformational and environmentally regenerative in everything that they do. And so the dream team for putting all this together, we've got my brother Eric Miller, we've got Crystalyn Rodriguez. She's from Rosamond, California, and spearheaded the whole first community cafe that we did in Rosamond. And in addition to Eric and Crystalyn and the Hemperor of Japan, we have one other key member who I think I showed in the picture last week, and that is Cheyenne Salah, who's the musician, actor, rising star in Hollywood, right in the middle there. Anyway, so that's in with the good, right? So the overall strategy is out with the bad, and then in with the good. Out with the bad, in with the good, and we've got our cast of characters that's growing, and so that's basically what I'm conveying is, look, this is one possible strategy. Let's talk about others. What can we do together to heal Mother Earth and to save whatever can be saved of life on Earth? So there's actually 3 pillars to the strategy that I propose. Out with the bad, in with the good, and let's leverage our collective intelligence, our collective minds and collective hearts to make all of the above happen. And that's where Radish and How to Change the World come in. Going on mute.
One thought in terms of out with the bad. Part of the issue of drug prohibition, which does allow the criminal cartels to prosper through the movement of drugs and their use. But it also allows the state the police apparatus, the deep state, whatever terms you want to use, to control the population. Because as long as the drugs are illegal, it's very, very easy to plant drugs on people for purposes of taking away their credibility or incarcerating them and essentially eliminating them as being a problem. It's also, I suspect, although I don't really know what's going on with it, I suspect that pornography is another area that is being used in that way to control people, to blackmail people, et cetera, et cetera. And it's so I think that there is more bad than just simply allowing the criminal cartels. And that, this book, The CIA is Organized Crime, by this guy, Douglas Valentine. It's a really good analysis of how the Central Intelligence Agency and the military, or the part of it is in the military, how they are able to really prosper in terms of, controlling. For example, this guy Valentine, he was originally an expert on the, I think it was called the Phoenix Project, that was used to control South Vietnam. And what he claims is essentially they're in the process of rebuilding that over here at present in the United States. And having people be very, very vulnerable to being removed is a part of the strategy. So I think that in addition to just criminal cartels, and they're doing a lot of things which are really a problem, but it's also the case that I think a lot of people would respond to the idea that it allows for innocent people, or essentially to be caught up and manipulated or removed. I mean, there's nothing easier than planting drugs, and of course there's no discussion about really the effects of drug. One final kind of tangential thought on that comes to me. When they had the prohibition of alcohol back, I guess, I don't know, was it 1919, so somewhere around that time, and what pushed for the prohibition of alcohol was all of the obvious problems that were associated with the drug alcohol. Interesting thing, the number of lynchings that took place in the South decreased significantly once they went to alcohol prohibition. Some of the domestic violence was reduced, etc. So prohibition is, kind of a tricky thing, and I suspect that without, talking about, in your case, Jamin, I'm thinking, and what we're talking about here is legalizing or decriminalizing, or however you want to put it, all drugs. Is that correct?
I hesitate. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking? If you're not, please mute. Oh, looks like you muted.
Yeah, I am muted.
No. You've muted. What you've done is you've muted your camera, but your mic is not muted yet.
Hold on. Let me. Okay.
There you go. Okay, thank you, Dan. And feel free to turn the camera back on.
Yeah.
But now you're on. I'm going to go on mute.
Okay.
Now we can hear. Okay, there you go. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so to answer your question, I hesitate to say basically yes is my answer to your question. Decriminalize all drugs, but the big caveat I want to throw on there is I am a big believer in regulation, right? In other words, what I don't want are a bunch of heroin and cocaine shops for, hey, as long as you're 21 or older, you can buy all the heroin and cocaine you want. That's what I don't want. And so we need to strike a balance. And I've speculated on possibly creating like these government-run clinics where people can go to get their doses of these various substances, have safety, but also make it so those clinics are integrated with maybe they're right next door to a community cafe, where people can really get their needs met, their fundamental human needs that are not being met, that drive them to use substances, their needs for community, for friendship, for belonging, for being part of something, right? So that's why we're pushing the community cafes so hard, and we're going to launch the first permanent one here in Federal Way, Washington, to the south of here. and really start that part of the movement. So, but to answer your question, basically, yes, decriminalize, regulate, and take the market away from the criminal drug cartels.
And I think that it's really important to have people be, let's say that somehow all drugs were able to be decriminalized, including cocaine, heroin, etc., just anything. And obviously you'd have to be an adult to use the drugs. But I think that there needs to be some discussion somewhere of the actual effects of these drugs, so that people would have a basis for understanding, which regrettably they really don't, as to how the drugs affect an individual. So we have probably the worst drug of them all, alcohol, completely legalized. I mean, it's easy to argue, as they did back in the days of Prohibition, that alcohol is a hellish drug. It causes all sorts of violence and rape, and on all levels. And the statistics, the criminology statistics really support that. So alcohol is probably the worst drug in terms of the damage that is put out in the culture, the society. And since we already have that legalized and everybody's kind of okay with that, it seems like it's easy enough to say that, you can have these other drugs be legalized, and people need to understand what the drugs actually do. And to also note, as we see it in the culture right now, we have this so-called opioid crisis that Trump was talking about, where we have all these people who've been addicted because they've been giving these powerful pain-killing drugs, opioid drugs, out through the medical profession. And the pharmaceutical industry has supported this because they would essentially support anything that would make them profits. But at this point in time, if we toughen the drug laws, someone like Trump, and there's a lot of forces in the country that would really argue that the drug laws need to be essentially toughened, and we can't allow our children to be, allowed gateways into all of these evil drugs. And so I see that as something that has to be explained to people, so that someone could understand. If you go and you drink alcohol, it's what it's going to do to you, and they know it because that's why they use it pretty much. it will take away all of your anxiety, you know, to a large degree, it'll take away, diminish anxiety and shame, guilt. So that's what alcohol does, but alcohol allows anger to be disinhibited and unleashed depending on the context. That's a very dangerous drug. If you look at a drug like these opioid drugs, which are very addictive, more addictive, faster than, say, alcohol, which is also addictive, then you don't have the same kind of problem, because the opioid drugs take away anxiety and shame, guilt, but they also take away anger. So you don't have people, when they're under the influence of those drugs, acting out. It can hurt their capacity in other ways. When you're talking about the stimulating drugs like cocaine and amphetamines, there you have a situation where the people are being fueled with the interest, excitement, emotion, which, just like anger, takes away fear and shame, guilt, and but it also doesn't do anything to inhibit anger. So people who are using cocaine or amphetamines, which are being prescribed freely to children for their attention deficit problems, what that does is it allows irritability and anger to come through if the context creates it. That's just a little simple breakdown of what these drugs actually do. And I think that if this campaign, which I think has, got some, certainly as far as marijuana goes, it has a lot of traction at this point in time. But I think that it's important that as this is being promoted, that people who are promoting it are completely prepared to explain the various drugs, including alcohol, to just point out that you've already got the worst drug in the world really legalized, if you really understand what it does. Most people, it's all minimized and kind of not allowed to be talked about because there's so many economic interests, big economic interests, that rely on alcohol. So I just wanted to, share some of these thoughts and just something to, you're pretty good, Jamin. I heard you I don't know, some years ago, I don't even know how I came across it, but it was a radio interview you did talking about, the marijuana situation, and, whatever you said, it seemed pretty good. But I do think that anybody who is promoting this has to be able to break down the differences in the drugs. You have, in addition to the stuff I've mentioned already, interest in keeping prohibition there, you have the large 12-step communities all over the country. And their position generally is nobody should be using any drugs, totally. So I think that anticipating these kinds of resistances, or it is important in the campaign, and anything that could be done on that level, I think, would be useful. I personally have believed for a long, long time that there should not, all of these drugs should just simply be made accessible to people without there being criminal sanctions. And by the way, you also have the entire medical profession, which benefits hugely by having these drugs be illegal. I mean, if people could access pharmaceuticals, as adults, knowing the benefits and the drawbacks, it would be a real serious problem in terms of the kind of control that exists, which is, again, a huge economic interest. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'm going to mute out.
No, really, really good comments, Dan. You've got a lot of expertise and knowledge, and that needs to be disseminated. So, and it's because of the complexities of all these different issues. That's why in that poster, the second poster, you know, how do we get rid of the cartels, repeal prohibition, and replace it with blank? I just put a big blank there. It's for us to figure out. There's no obvious answer that just jumps out, because we have to balance all these different concerns. One point I'd make is that prohibition actually increases drug use. I mean, here we are in the land of prohibition, the United States of America. We've got 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's drug use, illicit drug use. And so prohibition does not prohibit anything. If anything, it causes more people to use drugs. So anyway, we need to look at it holistically, as we've talked about. But I want to get back to the main point, because we can talk for hours about drugs. But my main point is we urgently need a strategy to get out of this death spiral that we're in and on to a path towards healing. And that is, that's what I think about and work on every single day, is how do we do that? So what I put out in that poster of you know, big picture strategy, a new path forward, is precisely one such strategy for getting us off of the highway to hell and onto a path towards healing, towards a whole world. And you know, the thing is, with everything that people are experiencing these days, with Mother Earth imploding and all the political, social, economic, starvation, you name all the problems that we've got, what I see a lot of people doing is basically seeking to protect themselves in one way or another. I see hoarding, and for people who aren't hoarding but are doing, you know, positive things out there in the world, I see them basically trying to say, well, look, well, I'm doing my part. I'm doing this, right? I'm recycling, I'm bicycling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So I'm okay. So like, don't blame me, don't blame me. And what I really want to get out there is we need to get beyond this, you know, me-centric view of, hey, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm doing the right thing, so don't blame me. And we need to get beyond that personal level of focus and make the jump towards the planetary. And in the process, we will be naturally focused on what do we need to do to heal Mother Earth? What strategy? So, you know, if you like the drug cartel, organized crime strategy, out with the bad, in with the good, bring it, join us, right? If not, what strategy do you propose that is planetary, that looks at the planet, that doesn't look at the individual? Yes, there's a zillion things each of us can do to be able to hold up our white flag and say, I'm okay, don't blame me. But that's not going to carry the day. 7.3 billion people saying, don't blame me, I'm just squirreling away for a rainy day and I'm okay. That's not going to carry the day. We need a revolution. We need to do something absolutely radical, and that's what I'm proposing. So what I'd love to hear is either A, wow, high five, Jamin, love what you're doing, let me support that, or B, you know what, I don't like what you're proposing, Jamin, here's an alternative, right? Going on mute.
Doctress, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I will jump in. I'll just say that I've heard your rap about, you know, drug cartels and the bad and the good. And for me, the drug crisis is a terrible thing because people don't have a clear vision of the future and how they can contribute to it. And there's not a system that allows people to make contributions. I am a student of Buckminster Fuller, and he says, we can't defeat the existing system. We have to build a better one instead. And I'm just looking at this article right now where he says, we can't change political reality by fighting it. We can't change the oppressive nature of a coercive government by voting for more favorable politicians. We can't bring about individual freedom by convincing everyone to want it. We can't bring about the kinds of society we want by trying to tear down the old parts that we don't like. And he goes on about this. And I think the drug problem is more of just fighting the old system. And for me, at least, in this limited life and limited energy that I have, I want to just build the new. And I think your community cafes, I mean, that takes a lot of work to do that, to really pull that off, Jamin. And for me, that's the new. That's the new. And that's where, if I was you, or if I was working with you, that's where I'd want to put my energy rather than being on the street corner with the sign. You know, I know you have this hero archetype within you, and you want to just stand up and hold your shield. You know, when I was out there with you, I just got gladiator. You know, you're much more gladiator than Darth Vader. And, you know, maybe that's your role. So I can't tell you, you know, just put your energy into the new. But for me, that's where I want to be, because that to me is the healing, and I need that healing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I again, this may be tangential. I hope it's not, because I think it's somewhat connected. All these things actually seem very interconnected, even though they sort of seem like different things. And of course, energy is very, very finite. You know, I was talking to these guys I get together with once a week, you know, to have lunch. And we do talk about a lot of politics, social issues, and you know, and since we go all the way back to, you know, the teenage years, we talk about some of that. But I was bringing up the fact that it seems like you have two entirely different narratives going on in the country. You know, you have the Fox News, conservative talk radio, InfoWars, other alt-right outlets. They are putting out a certain narrative. On the other hand, you have New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, etc., putting out a very different narrative, which both of them essentially demonize the other grouping. So you've got the country constantly obsessed with, you know, the evil other side, which is part of the narrative they listen to. It's really probably the key component. And what that does is it completely divides everybody. You know, it's divide and conquer. And the only way that so few people who, you know, the wealthy elite, or, you know, the 1%, whatever way you want to refer to the most wealthy and powerful people, in order for them to keep the ideology that justifies what they have and expect to have and their families to have, you have to keep the huge population under control. I mean, you know, it's in the United States, we have over 300 million people. And that's a lot of people to actually control in an effective way. I mean, while you have a democracy, supposedly, you know, there's a liberal democracy. So you have this kind of divisiveness where people are at each other's throats over all sorts of issues. And I think that that's something which needs to be kind of talked about on some meta level, to just be able to discuss why it is, you know, that you can allow two entirely different narratives to be going on, and without any discussion about that as a phenomenon. I'm sure it's talked about somewhere in, you know, philosophy departments or something, but it is a huge problem. And I think where we get to the complete unraveling of the climate, or the change in the climate, the issues of drug cartels, people need to be given some insights into why it is that, nothing really can get organized or done in an effective way. And it just seems like as long as we continue to not be able to get people together. So your concept of the drug cartels as being, kind of encompassing many, many things that are wrong. I think everybody can agree with that. You're going to continue to get a good response. When we go to kind of broadening it ultimately to, the criminal destruction of the planet, I think that there are, kind of similar forces at play. I mean, same thing that motivates the drug cartels motivates the energy industry, and has. But I think that being able to get people to conceive of what's going on in a different way, rather than we've got two sports teams, University of Washington versus University of Oregon, and everybody can get all worked up about everything connected with those two teams. And yet the commonalities get lost as long as you have people angry at one another and thinking, they have to fight. So that just came to my mind. I'm just tossing it out there, and I'm going to go on mute.
Oh yeah, I think the non-dual way of thinking is, for me, that's where my heart lies. I don't want, this good and bad, that's the enemy, that's the good person. I don't know. That's never really worked. And during the Vietnam War, when it was that us and them, the communism versus capitalism, that just creates war. And we got to get out of that way of thinking. So that's why I'm just thinking, hey, I want to be on that creative space and the mode of the new paradigm. And, I'm going to do that rather than fight the old system. I've never won fighting the old system. I've had headaches. You can get yourself killed. It's just a rotten thing to try to work and make reforms within this system.
And again, sorry to keep doing this today, but I'd probably do it other days too. But with the triple C concept, assuming that actually is something which really proliferates concretely, having an ability to educate people about what's going on with the planet might be able to be integrated. I think you mentioned something about that, Jamin. For example, just keeping people informed in some sort of reliable way of what the average global temperature is. And just being able to have people know that, let's say they could come to a triple C place and find out, what's the latest, just like a weather report, like people tune into every day, where you see what's actually going on the planet. Now, I know out on Facebook, they have, the various pages that will give some people that information. However, it doesn't really get out there in the same way. And I think that if you actually had, and I don't know whether this is even remotely possible, but if you had, let's say, these triple C places all over the country, you actually had them, that somehow that could happen. And you had also a informational service, where you essentially give people the weather report. You can come in there to get your meal. You can come in there maybe for other purposes, but you'll also get, we're going to inform people of what's going on with the weather, because nobody knows, nobody understands. I had a lunch with a woman that I used to work with in terms of mental health advocacy work, and I told her what was happening as far as abrupt climate change, the exponential climate change, and she, very well-educated, intelligent person, did not know about it at all. And since that time, you know, she's contacted me for some additional information. So the ignorance about so many things is a real problem. And I always feel at some point during the day that time is so short. You know, it's just so brief. We hardly have any time in which to take constructive action. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to mute out, turn it.
I went to a lecture at the U of A this week, and it was Dante, I've forgotten how you say his name, but he is the chief scientist of this project called the OSIRIS-REx. And I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's a big project of NASA. And they are going to an asteroid called Bennu. And they're going to go and they're taking samples and finding out what that asteroid is about, trying to find the origins of Earth. And also about mining the asteroid for various resources. And this is this opens up a whole new field of possible billions of dollars. They think that these asteroids even have water. They have minerals that are needed to expand the human race into outer space. So this is a big step forward. So Dante, he's a very interesting man. He knows Japanese. He's came from a very poor background. He got all these scholarships. He's about your age, Jamin. He's married to another planetary scientist. And he's had this full life. I mean, I do not meet that many people that their lives have this poetic circle and just so successful in what he's done, and he's not arrogant. So I got to talk to him afterwards, and I said, you know, what about the biosphere too? Do you think that this habitat, who is working on habitats that we can have for outer space exploration? And he says, well, you know, there's really not any experiments going on in that direction. The Biosphere 2 in Arizona certainly led to a lot of questions, and the results were that, you know, these things worked and these things did not work, like they lost oxygen in the container. And then he led me to Elon Musk, you know, who was thinking about going to Mars. And of course, they're going to have some kind of container in order to live on Mars. So I just really feel like that, to me, is a possible avenue to where my imagination is and what the future of our planet is, you know, because if we can figure out how to live on outer space in a recycling way, then we're going to understand how we need to live here on Earth. And, you know, how to contact Elon Musk, how to become part of his program, you know, do I have anything to contribute to that experiment? I mean, those are the questions I started asking after that lecture. And I went back and I did some research about this asteroid mining. And right now, it's all private companies that are invested in it. You know, there is not, it looks like the frontier of space is going to be privately funded, which is too bad, you know, because I think these resources should be for the entire planet and should have a plan on how to use the asteroid belt or other resources in outer space to create a planet that works for everyone. So that was my big exciting week, was hearing Dante and seeing such a man who has is so full and so rounded, so holistic in his whole life story.
All righty. No, good stuff. Well, it's almost the top of the hour. I actually need to wrap and go on. Y'all can continue if you want to, but before we wrap, at least my participation in this meeting, I would like to propose, since we've been recording up till now, that we stop the recording and then y'all can continue if you want. I would love to actually post this, you know, what's now almost a 1 hour recording to my Facebook page and encourage y'all to do the same thing. Let's get this conversation out there beyond just the three of us so other folks can participate, because I think this is a pretty rare conversation, talking about a holistic strategy to transform life on Earth and save what can be saved of life on our dying planet. You know, what the heck else are we going to do? You know, and we've got a lot of really interesting perspectives that have just, in the last hour, a lot of great points and topics have been raised. So I'd love to get this out there into the world. So before I sign off, and I'll stop the recording here in a minute, but if once you guys, but if you could just weigh in very briefly, because I do have to go. But are you guys okay with me, you know, making this public and posting it on my Facebook page? And of course, y'all could do the same. Can I see a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Even one thumbs down and it's nixed. But I'd like to either see a thumbs up or thumbs down from the two of you before we end this recording. Thumbs up from Dan.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Okay. So if you guys have any quick last words to say, because I do have to go, but then y'all can continue, but I just want to stop this recording before I jump off. Just so it's not a super long 2 or 3 hour saga, but less than an hour ideally. Any last words before I stop recording?
Yeah, one final thought. You know, the polarization that we have in the United States and really elsewhere, it also infects the climate change debate, where you have again, you know, kind of the conservative Republican, you know, Sean Hannity, Fox News, etc., arguing for a denialist position on climate change. You can take various forms. And then you have the other side at least acknowledging it's a problem, even though they can't begin to understand how imminent the dystopia is. But it's the same thing. We can't talk about that bifurcation, the polarization. Why does it even exist? Why can't that be discussed as to how harmful it actually is? And why can, you know, and as I've said before, why couldn't we have, you know, Guy McPherson, Paul Ehrlich, Peter Wadhams debating, you know, on national media, those who are denialists? That would seem like such a useful thing theoretically, but it's not possible as long as people are kind of at each other's throats and not looking at that higher level, that meta level of analysis. So I just want to conclude with that. And
I will conclude by saying that the crisis that we face is a crisis of the imagination. To get over it, we need to think outside the box, and we need to think off the planet. And what will work in outer space will also be work on planet Earth. And that's how we create the utopia, is thinking holistically, globally, and cosmically. And that's where my attention is going to be focused. The drug war, the abortion issue, all these other crises that we face can be solved by the imagination.
Totally agree. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I'll end this recording. Y'all can keep going if you want, and I'll put it up on Facebook. And let's let's see people's comments, and let's expand the conversation and invite other guests and make this happen. Good stuff. Viva la imaginación. Thanks so much, Dan and Doctoress. Thanks all for watching. We'll see you next time.